welcome to the Everyday Defender podcast. I'm your host, Chris Goosen, and as always, I'm joined by my friend from the Netherlands. How you doing, Koos?
Hey, Chris. How you doing? I'm fine. It's finally getting a little bit, we get a little bit more hours of light these days, so I'm already looking forward to some better weather as well. So going towards summer.
That's awesome for you guys. I live in Australia. We have great weather most of the time, so it's pretty good.
Even in winter times, right?
Yeah. We're still. I think tomorrow
I'm
we're
jealous.
expecting like 38 degrees Celsius tomorrow, so it'll be very hot tomorrow again. But hey, I really can't complain. It's it's pretty good. We have no bushfires, we have no floods going on at the moment. So hey, like I said, it's very, very good.
It's funny to hear what kind of different problems you have over there as well. Well, we had some snow recently, and the whole country is derailed literally when we get some snow in.
Hey, I was watching the Winter Olympics last night, and the Dutch are very, very good at the skiing, skating stuff, right? So I guess that's why you guys are skating around most of the time. So it's anyway, in today's episode, I am excited about your topic, Koos. I really am excited to hear about Passkeys and kind of the current state of Passkeys, right? So excited to kind of dig into that. Right. I have been thinking a lot about SecOps and automation and PowerShell and that type of geeky stuff. And I kind of thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about the state of where we are with PowerShell modules and automation and stuff like that. And so,
and we're also touching a little bit on your nostalgia heartstrings, I guess, Chris.
That's right. It's funny how long it's been, this whole thing, and I guess we'll kick into it straight away, and kind of tell the story, right? So I've called this module wars, and if you picture sort of that Star Wars theme and maybe that Star Wars theme song playing, right? So the history lesson for this is, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and it wasn't that far away. It was 2012-ish or so.
It was far away.
Well, that is true. That is true. I put together a script back then when I was just I was doing a lot of Exchange Online work, right? And I put together a script to simplify connecting to Exchange Online. And it started off just as a script, just a basic PS1 script, and I ended up adding a GUI to it because I just wanted to see if I could do it. And then that it was great, and I used to use this thing, and after a while I realized that I had shared this with so many people, and it was all over the place, right? That I was like, you know what, I'm gonna publish this thing. And I don't know, I mean, you've been around long enough, you probably remember the TechNet gallery, right, where we used to publish our scripts before GitHub was a thing. So I had it published on TechNet gallery for a really long time, and over time, and it was called Connect EXO back then because it really just connected you to Exchange Online. And this was before, widely deployed MFA even, right? So really all it did was it would launch a little box that said username, password, you click OK, and it would launch into the Exchange PowerShell modules. Obviously over time, more and more modules became available. MFA became a thing. There was a whole bunch of things. And so I, started sort of developing this tool that became known as Connect 365. And I couldn't find exactly when Connect 365 was born, but I think it was sort of probably around 2014 or so. Connect 365 was probably at least 10 years ago. And it just became a tool to very easily connect to all the services in M365. So you could load all the modules, and actually later on I built like a prerequisite checker so I could even check if the modules were installed for you. And then you could select all of the things. So if you wanted to connect to Exchange Online and Azure AD and all of these things, you could select all the ones you wanted to connect to, click OK. It would log you in, and it would load all of the correct modules for you so that you had one PowerShell window and you could go off and do, all the things that you wanted to do.
I actually recognize the screenshot you put in the show notes, Chris. So I probably used your tool without me knowing you back then. So that's funny.
That's funny. Yeah, that's cool though. And over the years, this has just been a little passion project of my own where I've just done things on it just whenever I wanted to test myself or do something where I could I wanted to figure out if I could do something, right? So I, at one point in time, I think maybe 2022 or 2023, I built my own API so I could do a version check. And that may mean nothing to anyone, but it was just a fun thing for me to do, to be able to build an API that does something very simple like check versions, right? Now, long story short, and the reason we're kind of going down this whole sort of history is that ultimately we were connecting to modules in PowerShell to do things, right? And over time, not only has names changed, and Azure AD became Entra ID, and we've had all these name changes, but the way we authenticate to our modules and our services has changed. MFA has become a thing. Service principles are a thing. All of these things have sort of started to take shape. And so, the world is changing, right? And I've been thinking a lot lately about making some changes to Connect 365, bringing it up to date again. And one of the things that I kind of realized was there's a lot of just bad information around, right? I think a lot of folks seem to believe and think that the graph, Microsoft.graph, or the graph SDK is the only way to interact with M365 via PowerShell these days, right? Now, if you're really, really hardcore, you're probably just using graph natively. So you're doing, invoke web request or invoke what have you.
Constructing your own headers and bodies and
right.
whatnot. Yeah.
But for many of us, as cool as that is, it's not always an efficient thing unless you're like a developer and this is what you do all the time, right? And if you're going to go out and write scripts to do things, you could spend the time to do that. But if you're just going to be doing like admin tasks on a day-to-day basis, maybe that's a little heavy. It's a bit of a heavy tool to be using. And so what I wanted to do was sort of talk a little bit about, where we are with modules for managing M365 and Entra or Entra ID, right? I'm not really going to widen this too much because I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff around there for just Azure, and we have those the AZ or AZ modules for managing all the Azure service. I'm not really talking about that today. I'm really just going to talk about where we are with M365 specifically, and as you guessed it, we have the Microsoft Graph, or I think it's technically called the Microsoft Graph SDK for PowerShell. I think that's the real name. That's something that sort of came about around 2020. Microsoft started sort of making that public, and you'll be familiar with the sort of MG commandlets, right? So get MG user and stuff like that. Whereas if you think a little bit about some of the historic way we would connect to, for example, Azure AD, we first started with something called MS Online, or the MSOL module, which was, get MSOL user. Very, very old. That stuff sort of started getting deprecated in 2024 timeframe, I think. We had the Azure AD modules, which actually use something called Azure Graph, which is an older version of what is essentially Microsoft Graph today. And you would be familiar with those ones with, get AAD user and stuff like that, right? And so the evolution of all of those things that came out of those when they got deprecated in 2024 is the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK, or Microsoft.graph, which is really just the name of the package. That's what most people use, I guess, and that's where most people's heads kind of go when you talk about automation and PowerShell use for M365. But it's a handy tool. Obviously, there's a ton there, and it does obviously Entra, it does Intune, some Teams, there's some SharePoint in there. It's really, really good if you want to do reports, and if you want to work in, for example, conditional access policies, all that type of stuff. Like, it's a very deep tool set, but it isn't the only tool set. And I personally find it pretty tricky to use because it's so closely linked to Graph. It doesn't always work the way you expect, right? You can't just pass in a username and expect to get a result there. You really need to be formatting everything correctly, and you're going to be using GUIDs a lot of the time. So, it can be a little tricky. But the good news is that there are still some workload-specific modules that do exist. And actually, something I recently found that I didn't know about was the Microsoft Entra PowerShell module, right? It's Microsoft.entra, and it's more of a lightweight for just administration of Entra ID. So if you're going to be doing stuff with users and groups and apps and policies and stuff like that, you don't need to go and use Graph. Now, obviously, you can use Graph if it's doing what you want, but this is a much more lightweight, slightly easier to use module that I was very pleasantly surprised with. And so I thought, that's one I definitely want to mention and talk about here. we still have the Exchange Online management or Exchange Online tools. Now, I think, and I'm sure there's going to be some, I'm probably going to get this wrong. Someone's going to correct me, but I think this is the third version of the Exchange Online modules. So there was the original Exchange Online module. Then there was V2, which was very slow and didn't work so great. And then I think this is the actual third release of the Exchange Online PowerShell module. And if you're going to do anything with Exchange Online, and also if you're going to do anything in the Security Compliance Center sort of purview type stuff, that's the module you want to use for that. And I think what you'll find is folks who have a sort of a multi-dimensional role where you're administering M365 as a whole, you're probably going to have multiple of these things installed. I do a lot of security assessments for M365, and so I have all of these things installed on whatever machine I'm working on, because I'm connecting to Graph, I'm connecting to Exchange Online to do stuff, I'm connecting to Teams and things like that. So the Microsoft Teams module still exists. It's still available. You can still use it. Microsoft SharePoint Online also has it's called Microsoft.online.sharepoint.powershell. That module still exists as well. So really, if we think about what's gone away and what we've lost, it's only those Azure AD specific things that have been around for a long, long time, right? And they don't work anymore. Actually, I went and found I have a very old desktop machine that sits next to me on the floor here, and this thing is never booted up. Usually it just sits here. And I plugged it in today, booted up into Windows 11 because I don't have a Windows 11 machine anywhere else, and actually tested a bunch of the stuff from Windows 11 so I could make sure I wasn't giving false information. And yeah, the MSOL doesn't work anymore. The Azure AD module doesn't work anymore. If you connect to it, you get a very nice error message that says its access is denied. So those have gone away. They've obviously been deprecated, and there's been a long sort of deprecation story there since I think it's March of 2024. But Exchange Online is still there, Teams is still there, SharePoint is still there, and then there's some other ones that you may or may not use, right? I think these are a little bit lesser known, and they're probably not something you would use all the time unless you specifically work in these areas. There's an AIP service module for the old AIP or rights management stuff. There's a couple of modules for the Power Platform. So if you dig into sort of Power Apps administration, there's some modules there. And then there's a Power BI management module as well. If you actually are, a heavy Power BI user in your tenant, in your environment, which is really, really helpful.
So Chris, are these modules now, because I was encountering the issues with the Azure AD modules a while ago when I migrated to macOS, because as you know, macOS only runs PowerShell Core, so the newer version, everything beyond, starting from version 6. And the Azure AD module only work on the classic Windows PowerShell, and I still get a lot of confusion from that, because a sysadmin to which I provide a PowerShell script will automatically open up Windows PowerShell on their desktop or server, and they aren't even aware of Windows of PowerShell Core. Are all the modules you mentioned, are they now also transitioned into the PowerShell Core world, or are some of them still requiring legacy Windows PowerShell?
So that is a very good question, right? I know the Graph obviously is one that was built for that.
Yes, that's the new one.
Yeah. Now, I have not tested have I tested the Entra one? I believe I have tested the Entra one. Exchange works well with PowerShell Core.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that Teams and SharePoint do as well. The one that I'm least familiar with is probably SharePoint, because I don't do a ton of SharePoint work, right? But what is nice now, apart from the fact that they're all named, the naming standards on these things are all different, right? Some of them, Microsoft, the Entra, Microsoft, the Graph, that's cool. Exchange Online Management, and Microsoft, the naming's all over the shop. But what is nice is that all of these things are now available through the PowerShell gallery. So all of them are there. And I think because of that, we're seeing a little bit more standardization on using stuff with Core. Like you, I'm a Mac user. And so I also find it really frustrating when I need to do something and I have to go and find a Windows machine to be able to test or do stuff, because I don't have a Windows machine, and I don't run a Windows VM specifically for just modules, right? So not anymore anyway. But no, it's a good call out. I do believe most of them are now cross-platform, and they also sort of support newer releases of PowerShell, which is really helpful. Obviously, you still get the little nuances. I get the same problem because in my work environment, I'm one of very few that uses a Mac. So if I write scripts, the paths are always messed up because I'm using forward slashes instead of backslashes because I'm on a Mac. Everyone else is using what have you. So that gets a little interesting sometimes. So I got to think about that if I'm going to be giving scripts to colleagues to run because But
maybe also good to point that out to our listeners, since we're talking PowerShell now. This is not specifically Microsoft security topic, perhaps, but we touch PowerShell regularly, of course. So Windows PowerShell, or PowerShell as we all know, was originally a Microsoft closed source product up until version 5 something, which is the latest version still shipped with your Windows installation. And Microsoft branched it off into an open source PowerShell afterwards. And that became PowerShell Core. And I also believe it's built on .NET something. It has a different architecture behind under the hood. I don't know the specifics on that. But starting with PowerShell 6, and we're now up until 7 something. 7.5, I believe. I don't know from the top of my head, but so 7.5. PowerShell Core is the latest PowerShell. So people, please stop using Windows PowerShell, although it is shipped with your Windows installation and you have to install PowerShell Core separately. I don't understand why Microsoft does not just ships Core with Windows or makes it a default feature in Windows or whatever, but you have to install it manually. And also, I see a lot of people still using ISE, right? Windows PowerShell with ISE. That's so funny.
And I never used ISE. That was never part of my workflow. And so it's really, well, I say that I've obviously, and I think many of us, back in the day have had time where you log onto a server for something and then you need to look at a PS1 and the only thing that's on there is either Notepad or ISE, right? Yeah. And I would usually just use Notepad, but we've all opened ISE by mistake for on those. Yeah. But no, I've never been an ISE user, but you're right. It's funny to see people that are sort of stuck in that way of doing things.
Well, I used ISE with some more complex scripts because you can add some breaks, for example, in between and do some more advanced debugging where there are some issues and you can see the actual values of your variables while the script was running. But you can all do that in VS Code nowadays. A lot of people don't know that, but there are debuggers in VS Code and you can run PowerShell there and add breaks and everything. So there's no need to use ISE ever again.
That's right. And you're right, though, as well, with just, a normal PowerShell. I think why it's probably still out there is it's backward compatibility, right? And if you're going to be doing anything with, and I think it's Microsoft Forms or WPF, where you have a GUI interface to a script or something, that stuff historically works better on the older versions of PowerShell. There's more things you need to do on core to make that work. And for a lot of us who have written these types of scripts, we're not hardcore .NET developers where this is an easy thing for us to transition, right? So I think part of it is just that there's a lot of investment. Folks have put a lot of time into building scripts and automations and stuff that still rely on PowerShell 3, right? Or work on PowerShell 3. Yeah. And they haven't taken the time. Now, I would say to those folks, if you're listening, you probably should start thinking about moving to newer versions of PowerShell, right? I'm sure there's apart from performance and all sorts of other issues, there's probably security reasons why you'd want to be doing that as well. And as older operating systems go away, that's it's something to think about. But I think that's it. I think it's really just a backward compatibility thing. If you're installing it on Linux or Mac, it's always going to be core. So we always get the latest and greatest when we do that. So
yeah. And also maybe a fun fact: PowerShell 6, so the open source variant, the open source one, the core PowerShell core, was released in January of 2018. So it's already 8 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
So it's not new anymore.
So actually, interesting. I saw this week that Jeffrey Snover was retired. Is retiring. And so for those folks, Jeffrey Snover was the person who actually created PowerShell. And he's a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. I've met him. I've been lucky enough to meet him a few times now at MVP Summit and had some great conversations with him. He's such a cool guy. Just such a smart, lovely, lovely person. And I think it was this week or last week I read that he was he was retiring. He's had a fantastic career at Microsoft. So, thank you for giving us PowerShell, Mr. Snever. We appreciate it very, very much.
Yeah.
So wrapping this up, I guess there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of call out as well, or just draw attention to, that there's some community or sort of non-Microsoft official modules as well that I really think are sort of must-haves, right? Especially if you're doing a lot of automation and stuff. There's the sort of pmp.powershell, which is the sort of PowerShell module for managing M365. I think it really started as a SharePoint thing, but it's become sort of a much wider. So, more than 700 commandlets across sort of SharePoint Teams, Planner, Power Platform, Entra. Really nice community project there to kind of build automation and PowerShell capabilities for managing M365. Really good one. Import Excel. I mean, if you're going to do anything with reporting and importing, exporting, CSVs are good, spreadsheets are better, right? And being able to import and export PowerShell spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets without actually having Excel installed is pretty cool. I think Doug Fink is the author of that module. Very cool module that I would say is almost a must-have. And then I got MCell PS, which is really a wrapper for the MCell or authentication libraries in .NET. So this was really, really useful if you're going to be doing things where, we talked about just using native graph before, where you do an actual, invoke web request to the endpoint. Well, if you use the MCell PS module, you could actually get your tokens and stuff in a little bit more simple way. And then you can use those tokens to sort of onward connect. So it makes it really, really simple if you're calling APIs maybe where there aren't really good PowerShell modules, or PowerShell modules are a little bit incomplete, and you're going to have to rely on sort of naked the native APIs. This is a great way to kind of handle and wrap that authentication layer. So definitely something to check out. So as I said before, I'm going to be working on some updates to Connect 365 over the next few months. I have some ideas. One of the things that's always bugged me about it is that it's because of the web or the graphical interface on it. It's always been Windows only, so I'm going to do some work now to take it to PowerShell Core and make it available to Windows and Mac, so that it can be used across, and update some of the modules, get rid of some of the old things that are no longer available to us, all that type of stuff. So if anyone's listening to this and you have used it or haven't used it, and you heard about it for the first time today, have a look, reach out to me on socials or on GitHub if there's any sort of feedback or feature requests. It's an old tool. It's been around for 10 or 12 or something like that years now, and at one point in time it was heavily used by folks. I suspect a lot of people have moved on to other things, but I want to do my bit and bring it up to 2026 standard here in the next few months. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you've got some ideas.
Yeah. And because I'm not sure if PowerShell Core does support any ways to do some UI window creation in front, especially because it's running on multiple platforms. You can always consider doing some nice ASCII art menus, Chris. I'm a big fan of those.
A TUI, right? We move away from the GUI to the TUI, the text user interface. TUIs are all the rage these days.
I never heard about the term TUI, but I will remember that. Yeah, it's the new GUI, I would say. Yeah. Nice. Thanks, Chris, for that topic. Looking forward to your updates coming soon to the community. I like to revisit actually Passkeys. So this is not new. We talked about Passkeys before, actually, in our very first episode in December of 2024. Time flies. But quite a few things have changed since then, and I believe now, lately, Passkeys became such mature that I think it's now finally time to start onboarding this at scale. Especially the whole user experience has improved a lot lately, and there are some new features being announced in public preview lately. I saw some community work on the topic, so that's why I thought it would be a good time to revisit Passkeys. Maybe just to start off with a short recap, a passkey is a passwordless sign-in method It uses public key cryptography, and instead of typing a shared secret. And the device creates a unique key pair for each website or service, and it keeps the private key safe on the device, and it proves the possession with an unlock like biometrics with your fingerprint or a PIN code. So it's complete multi-factor, but it is not vulnerable to any man-in-the-middle attacks. And I think passkeys matter because phishing has also gotten more effective by stealing passwords, but also by performing some real-world man-in-the-middle tricks. We talked about them before. Evilgenics is a popular example of how that can be demonstrated in practice. So the attacker is relaying the user's authentication through a fake login page, letting the user perform their actual login and MFA, and then the authentication token can be replayed. But there's also a risk with traditional MFA called MFA fatigue, where you get multiple prompts on your MFA device, and in the hope that people just accept it or approve the request. And that way the attacker has a successful MFA and they can register an additional MFA device, for example, to get some persistence on the account. So phishing-resistant MFA methods like passkeys break that chain by binding the sign-in to a legitimate site and requiring a cryptographic proof that can't be replayed through a fake login page. So that's the short gist of it. And again, quite a lot has changed since we first talked about this. Especially the user experience was a bit lacking at the start. When Microsoft introduced passkeys, it was first limited to only physical passkeys, like the YubiKeys. But also the whole user experience was a bit wonky. You were required to register a traditional MFA through the Authenticator app as well. And then you can add an additional MFA device in the form of physical passkey. But if you really want to require phishing-resistant MFA across the board, you still had those MFA Authenticator apps registered and everything. And the whole user experience, when somebody logs in for the first time, it wasn't possible to register a passkey right away. And that's also a recent change, I think.
That was definitely
really helps the onboarding.
When I was at Ignite and I was working at the Entra booth, that was a very large complaint from a lot of customers about adoption of passkeys, because they were like, well, we've got to go through this wonky process to get folks registered and onboarded. Then we can only get them to a passkey. And a lot of people were really complaining about that. I remember speaking to one gentleman, I think he was from Germany, and he was like, you don't even know how many tens of hours I've spent trying to work around this, and we just can't. And I was like, I don't think you can at this point. So this is great news that this is something that can now be has been updated or at least made a little bit more user friendly.
I'm not sure when this was introduced. Apparently after Ignite. I must admit I'm not into the deep weeds of passkey development. So I just noticed this because syncable passkeys is now a thing as well. So at first we only had device-bound passkeys. So the physical passkeys, I use a YubiKey myself with a fingerprint sensor on there. Later, Microsoft introduced passkeys through their Microsoft Authenticator app, which was still device-bound. So you registered the passkey on the Authenticator app, but when you were doing an authentication, a short Bluetooth connection was set up with the device to verify you were actually there at the same computer you're authenticating to. So that made it device-bound. And device-bound also means when you lose your iPhone or you lose your YubiKey, your key is gone. You cannot just restore an iCloud backup on a different iPhone and expect the passkeys to return there as well, because it was bound to the original device, part of the cryptographic proof and the whole idea of the authentication mechanism. Now with syncable passkeys, you have the ability to store the passkey in, for example, like an iCloud keychain or 1Password or Keeper or any other password vault. We've seen this a lot last couple of months with other services like GitHub, Amazon. A lot of websites now ask you to register a passkey for you. And that is obviously better than just a password, because it is MFA built in actually into the authentication process. But there is also a downside to that, because your passkey, your cryptographic proof, is stored in a password vault. It might be synced through an online service. If your computer might be compromised, or maybe your browser plugin is compromised, or there are other scenarios thinkable where your passkey might might land in the wrong hands. So that is a security consideration I will get to later as well. But together with syncable passkeys and a better onboarding flow and the user experience, we now also have passkey profiles, which also enables us to limit and set specific passkey profiles to specific groups of users, for example. And this is really valuable, where you, for example, say, okay, we have a certain account, we want that to have a syncable passkeys. Those don't have any, I don't know, high-level privileges, where we accept a somewhat less secure. Well, it's not less secure, but there might be some additional attack vectors thinkable on a syncable passkey. But we accept that for regular users, for example, because it's much easier, the fact that they can sync their passkey and they won't call the service desk any longer when they lose their physical key, for example, or their phone. And we accept that risk, that additional risk, so to speak, and we create a separate passkey profile for those groups of users, and we allow syncable passkeys for those and not for any other high privilege roles.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So if you wanted to promote YubiKey use still for your admin users, you could still make sure that admin users and anyone who has a PIM role or something like that, an admin account specific, still has to use a YubiKey or some physical thing. But your frontline workers and information workers and everyone else in the business, they're okay to be able to store that thing in their vault. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and by the way, now you touch on that topic, there is also something we call step-up authentication. And this was already possible with your conditional access policies. And I think it's already a good idea to consider role-based conditional access policies, where you say, whenever somebody is a global administrator, we require a phishing-resistant MFA string, for example. So when you log in with your regular MFA through the Authenticator app, you request a role of the global administrator. Somebody approves the role, hopefully. I hope it has an approval step. And then once you get the global administrator role, you get a prompt again to do an additional MFA. And then your authenticator approval will not cut it any longer. And you have to take out the YubiKey or the physical passkey or the passkey on your authenticator.
It's an interesting scenario you talk about there, because one of the problems with PIM role authentication or activation is that a lot of organizations want to go, you have your PIM role, they want to force MFA again when the user activates the role. So you've logged in, you've MFA'd, you go and activate a role. They want to force that second MFA again. If you're not stepping up, that's really difficult to do, because the original MFA that you've just done satisfies the MFA requirement. And so unless you've been logged in for a very long time or what have you, you're not always going to see that sort of second MFA request, right? Unless you actually are stepping it up to a higher level or a more secure level of MFA. So that's definitely one way to do that.
Yeah, and you can also think of the scenario where token replay was already used to gain access to your account, and somebody just requests a PIM role, and now they're a global administrator that same cached token. You're right. Yeah. So step-up authentication is also important. So I think for those reasons alone, you should really look into passkeys and make sure your high privileged roles and users are protected better than just with regular MFA nowadays. When I started using this, I got a little bit confused about the term attestation. That is something you can or should enable on those passkey profiles, which got introduced as well. And attestation, I had to look it up. It's part of the WebAuthn protocol, the web standard regarding passkeys. It's about proving what authenticator created the credential, again using cryptographic evidence during the registration. So the relying party, which is Microsoft Entra ID in this case, can validate the evidence against trusted metadata to decide whether to accept that specific authenticator model. And I read somewhere online people saying, without attestation, your passkeys are just regular key pairs. You still get a strong key-based login, but the service cannot reliably prove which authenticator model or provider generated the keys, or whether claimed identifiers are actually genuine. So attestation is really important to enable. So if you're using device-bound passkeys with FIDO keys, for example, or YubiKeys or any other, through the Authenticator app, make sure that attestation is enabled. When Microsoft started off with passkeys through the Authenticator app, you had to disable attestation because back then apparently the whole registration and the metadata was not in centralized databases or whatnot. I'm not sure how that works in the backend, but that's also a reason why I think it was not as streamlined a year or more ago. Now you should enable attestation on your device-bound passkeys, and if preferably, you can also add an AA GUID, which is let me see. I put the acronym in the show notes, I believe. Let me see, where did I put it there? I cannot find it anymore. I'm not sure what the AA stands for. Attestation something. Well, I'll look it up. Make sure it's in the show notes. But the AA GUID is actually a GUID of a passkey provider. You can add as an additional level to put in an allow or a block list, where you say, for example, we only register YubiKeys, for example, or Facian physical keys, and we only put those AA GUIDs in the allow list to make sure that we enforce the usage of only those two providers in addition to attestation.
Right. So that also then prevents the use of, even though you might, let's say you only allow YubiKeys, but you don't allow any of the other branded ones, right? That then you can't have someone turn up with some other key that they found on Amazon and use it if your policy says only YubiKeys. I've seen some scripts in the community that either extract or provide or both a list of what these, because obviously the manufacturers have a fixed, AA GUID, right? Or what have you. So there's a lot of information out there about why this is a good idea as well, which is cool.
Yeah, I did it at our own company a while ago when we started with passkey registration. We had a couple of different models because we had some biometric ones and some PIN ones. So we used Facian and YubiKey, and I believe even a third provider. I just registered it without having the allow list of AA GUIDs. And then I used a PowerShell module again to retrieve from Entra ID from the graph all the passkey GUIDs from all the users. And then I had my unique list of 3 GUIDs, which I put in the allow list. And I know as of then, we wouldn't allow any other vendors.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, with these syncable passkeys, you cannot enable attestation. So you have to disable that on the additional passkey profile, and that's why it's also maybe a little bit more risky in that regard. So that's why you should really consider scoping that syncable passkey profile to a specific set of group with users. Another consideration you should be aware of is guest accounts. So Microsoft will not let you let your guest users register for a passkey. I'm not sure why that is. It is in the docs, and it is known as a limitation as of now. So getting your guests onto passkeys is a little bit less straightforward. But there's a workaround to this. We at the company I work for use a lot of passkeys also in our managed services towards our customers, and we want to make sure that everybody logs in with a passkey, even if they switch to the other tenants of the customers we are providing services to. And a workaround you can use is by going into the cross-tenant access settings. First of all, I would always advise you to set up a conditional access policy to require the highest authentication strength, so to make sure it's phishing resistant MFA for your services. And then in the cross-tenant access setting, you can set up your partner tenant, so where the guest accounts come from, and then you can trust the inbound MFA claim for those partners, because you know it already aligns with your highest authentication strength. Thanks to the conditional access policy, you are sure that they can only come in with the highest MFA, and you can trust the claim. So you don't require them to do an additional MFA prompt when they reach your tenant. And this has multiple benefits because, as I said, we have a managed SOC, so to speak, with a lot of security analysts connecting to over 100 different customer tenants. And before, they had an MFA registration with all of these individual 100 customers. When somebody lost their phone, they had to re-register MFA for all the different tenants, and they probably had to
I'm
call
in
the
that
customer.
boat myself. I have a list of just
Yes.
MFA registrations from different customers. Now, I do separate my, just FYI, I mean, I guess I separate my MFA stuff. I use Microsoft Authenticator specifically and purely for work-related stuff. For my own personal use, I have different things that I use for that. But so at least I don't have jumbled in there, personal accounts and work accounts. But I have a very long list of customer, because obviously every customer that I work with, I have an account. Every account has MFA. I can see how this becomes a very long list.
But those MFAs are bound to your device. So if you lose your phone and you buy a new phone, even if you restore a backup from it, the MFA registration should be done again. And then you have to call up all your customers again to make sure they reset the MFA registration. This was a big thing for us in the past. So now we make sure that every single customer of ours require the phishing-resistant MFA authentication string when we come into their portal. And in return, we ask them to trust our MFA claim as a two-way validation in that regard. And which makes it great, because the physical passkey the security analyst holds is literally the key to access all the different tenants. And if we revoke that passkey, or if we revoke their guest account, they don't have any access anymore as well to all of the different tenants. So
that's a really good way to work that.
Yeah. I put a screenshot in the show notes where you can find this actual setting. Obviously, it's a little bit different if you work with a lot of different partner tenants with a lot of different guest accounts. Then you might want to exempt them from the passkey requirement. But otherwise, you should definitely look into making sure passkey is your new default along the road for MFA.
Did I see Microsoft are actually going to be doing that as well for you? Did they not announce last week or the week before that passkeys are going to become the default MFA for moving forward? There's a date. I'll have to look it up, I guess.
Okay, great.
But
I think missed that news.
Yeah. No, I think Microsoft are going to be forcing folks as well to do it, which we can debate whether that's a good or a bad thing. I guess you can see both sides of it, but I do think that they want folks to adopt it. It makes sense to adopt it because it is a more secure way to do it. Yeah. But a lot of businesses are not. A lot of companies are still struggling with MFA adoption, right? So go and now throw passkeys at them. It's just going to be slightly messy. So.
Yeah, and even with the syncable passkeys, it's arguably still safer than allowing replayable MFA requests, right?
Yeah.
And with the AA GUIDs I mentioned before, you can also require your users that they can only store that syncable passkey in a vault you approve of. So, for example, when you use LastPass Enterprise or Keeper for Business or whatever, you can put those AA GUIDs in the passkey profile so that the user cannot store it in their personal iCloud keychain, for example, and can only store it in the business password vault, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I put a lot of links in the show notes, not only the documentation about syncable passkeys, the new passkey profiles, which both are in a public preview right now, but also some links to Jan Bakker's blogs. You probably know him, Chris. He's from the Netherlands, of course. They call him Mr. Passkey as well in the community. He writes a lot about the topic. He has some good blogs about it with some great examples, and make sure to check that out as well.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This brings me to. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say I just found AA GUID is Authenticator Attestation Globally Unique Identifier.
Okay.
I just found it in the notes.
Oh, it is in the notes. Well,
yes.
I knew it was somewhere. Okay. Well, the AA GUID for short. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, with Jan Bakker and also your PowerShell topic brings us to the community project of this month, and I actually cobbled together multiple community products because this month I saw something really cool happen in the community. It all started with Fabian Bader, a German security MVP, who we have mentioned before. He's also one of the contributors of Meester. And I think we should touch on Meester again in the future as well, because I saw a version 2.0 coming by, but well, let's save that for a later episode. But Fabian wrote a blog about a tool he created called Invoke Entra ID Passkey Login. And it lets you authenticate against the Microsoft Graph with MFA as a user, but from a script using passkeys, which is pretty clever stuff. Because some of the APIs will not allow you to authenticate as a machine and only as a delegated user. So that's why he had to work around some stuff to do something in a GitHub action he created. But then Nathan McNulty, he's an MVP from the US, picked it up and built a standalone version of that called passkey login.ps1. His version uses a passkey exported from an Azure Key Vault, which is already a nice addition. And then Jos Lieben, he's from the Netherlands again. He said, hold my beer, and he took it even further. So he created new FidoKey.ps1, which is a script which can actually generate the passkeys for an account. So that's 3 community members building on top of each other in a short amount of time. And I thought that was really cool to see. Using these methods obviously raises some security concerns because, well, you're authenticating with a very secure passkey in an automated way with scripts, storing the passkey locally, temporarily, or storing it in a key vault. It has its downsides, of course. But you can create you can use the new passkey profile to have maybe a separate automation specific account in there to allow it only for certain actions, and while still enforcing the stricter requirements for your normal interactive logins, for example. Again, from a security perspective, you have to be very careful here. You need proper scoping, secure storage, as I said, of the passkey material, and very clear understanding, I think, of what you're actually doing. But I think when done responsibly, this can be extremely powerful. Think about automated environment provisioning, for example, one-time onboarding of tasks and other interactions with APIs that would otherwise require some manual MFA prompts. And beyond the technical details, I think, again, the most impressive part is how the community came together.
Yeah.
People spending their spare time creating tools and just simply giving it away to the rest of us.
Yeah, there's so much cool stuff out there. That's, and I think it's good to see people still putting the effort in, right? Because it can be a thankless job as well, and it's nice that people are still sort of doing it, and especially these folks. I got to say, I've definitely come. Is it Jos? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah,
Jos. I've definitely come across his stuff before. He's been doing this for a long time. If you look at his blog, he's got some like articles there from like 2014 and whatnot. So he's been contributing and pushing things into the community for a long, long time. So it's great when we come across these things where we can kind of give these guys a little bit of a shout out as well. So very, very cool.
I think it deserves the recognition and definitely a shout out and help them get help other peoples with the stuff they built and they made.
Yeah, no, very cool. That's very, very cool. Koos, thank you for that. Thoughtful and for stitching those together for me. I'd seen 1 or 2 of them pop up on LinkedIn, but I hadn't sort of stitched all of them together. I also did see today, this week or last week, the Meister V2 come out. I was playing with it yesterday, actually. I haven't seen. I mean, there's some changes on the interface, and it looks like they have some settings, a settings bar now where you can actually do some settings back into the tenant, which is interesting. I haven't messed with it too much. I literally just yesterday I was updating some of my automations that use Meister, so played with it just a bit.
Let's keep it as a cliffhanger for another episode.
Absolutely. I can't believe we're at the end of pretty much coming up on the end of February, right? So we'll be seeing each other here in a few weeks' time again. That's going to be fun.
It's already March.
I know. Well, it's gonna be very cool.
MVP Summit is coming up for people who might not be aware, and we'll be doing obviously a live recording again in Redmond.
Yeah, that'd be very, very cool. So,
and it might be either on Microsoft campus or in a kitchen at an Airbnb. We'll see about that when it happens.
Or in a cigar bar somewhere that we find.
A cigar bar. I'll hold you to it.
Yes. Thank you, folks, very much for joining us for another episode. We really appreciate you spending time with us. And, as always, reach out to us if there's anything that is troubling you or anything that you'd like to see us sort of cover or, get our commentary on the show. Like, subscribe, all those cool things. Koos, I look forward to seeing you next month, man. I've already started shopping for Tim Tams for all of the suitcase of Tim Tams I'll be taking over for the Dutchies.
Please make sure you bring those double chocolate ones, Chris.
100%, I will do.
And I'll make sure the stroopwafels come your way as well.
Excellent. Thanks, folks. And until next time, we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.